Hello, I'm Magician Mike Rose. At least that's what it says on the sign. And I'm here today to teach you an amazing card trick. This is one of those tricks that once you show it to someone, they'll think you are a master magician. Now, in order to do this, you want to be able to see what's going on. So we're going to bring the camera down here to the tabletop. Okay, here we are, ready for the card trick. First thing you have to do, this is a little professional tip, take the cards out of the box. I know, you probably already knew that. Now, in the time-honored tradition, you're going to have somebody pick a card. So you're just going to spread out the cards and they can take any card they want. Now, I don't have someone here to choose a card, so I'm just going to choose one at random myself and show it to the camera. It's the 3 of diamonds. Now, in this instance, because I'm teaching you the trick, I see and I know what the card is. But when you perform the trick, you don't know what the card is. You have someone choose a card and they look at it and memorize it and tell them it's very important that they don't tell you what it is. So they know their card, but you as the magician will not know the card. So after they've memorized it, you spread the cards back out, tell them to stick that card in there anywhere you want, and then you mix up the cards by giving them a bunch of cuts. Just cut them as much as you want so that you know they're really mixed up and your audience also knows that they're very mixed up. Now you explain that you are able to determine a card that someone would pick by asking them 3 simple questions. And the answers to the questions will give you enough information, enough insight into that person's character so that you can tell them which card they chose. Now they're not going to believe you, so then you'll have to prove it. And now here's the 3 questions. The first question is, you ask the person, what month were they born in? Doesn't seem like it would have anything to do with cards, but you tell them this will give you insight into the type of card their character would choose. So let's say, for instance, they tell you they were born in March. You go, oh, well, people born in March, that gives me a very good idea. You probably chose a card from this bunch. And you simply remove a bunch of cards and you say, I believe people born in March would have chosen one of these cards. And they're still not going to believe you. But then you continue. Say, now there's a second question. Tell me, are you right-handed or left-handed? Let's say they tell you they're right-handed. Say, very interesting. Right-handed people would have chosen one of these 3 cards. And then you ask them one last question. This question will tell me which of the 3 cards you most likely chose. Ready for the third question? Question number 3, are you wearing socks? They're going to look at you like you're weird, but that's okay. And then they'll tell you, yes, I'm wearing socks. Oh, well, in that case, you didn't choose any of those 2 cards. You must have chosen the 3 of diamonds. And it will, in fact, be the card they chose, just from asking these 3 apparently random questions. So, how does it work? Well, the questions have nothing to do with it. The questions are the presentation that make the trick entertaining and sets people off the track so they can't figure out how you really did it. The secret is, before you perform a card trick, you have to set up the deck. Now, it's a pretty simple setup, but you have to do it in private so nobody sees you do it. You have to separate all the black and red cards. So you put all the red cards in one pile and all the black cards in another pile. So these are all red, these are all black. Then you put the deck together, so now you got a deck that's half red and half black. Now, you can put it in the card box and you're all ready to go. Then, when you're ready to perform your trick, you take the cards out of the box, which I mentioned before, it's kind of important, and you spread out the cards and ask someone to choose a card. Now, there's 2 things that are important. First is, don't show the faces, because they'll notice that the cards are separated into black and red. The second important thing is when you spread the cards, only spread the top half. because you want them to choose a card from the top half. In this case, it would be a black card. So you spread the cards, they choose one, you put the deck back together exactly how it was, so it's still half red and half black. They're looking at their card, in this case, the 10 of clubs. Then, after they've memorized it, and again, tell them don't let you see it, then you spread the bottom half of the deck for them to return it. This way, their black card goes into the deck amongst all the red cards. That's the main secret. So their card goes back in. Now you can cut the deck all you want. And that one black card, in this case the 10 of clubs, will always be surrounded by red cards. And there'll be no red cards in the black cards. So here, I'll show you. If I cut the deck a few times, and it doesn't matter how many times you cut it, as long as you do just normal cuts. Take a bunch off the top, put them right on the bottom. A bunch off the top, right on the bottom. It doesn't matter how many you take off the top and put on the bottom, and it doesn't matter how many times you do it. Now, I'm going to show you what the cards could look like. Now, you don't show this to the audience, but if you see, you'll still have them separated in reds, but there'll be one black card amongst the reds, and then you have all the blacks. Now, also, you'll see there's some red cards at the other end of the deck. That's because you cut the cards a few times. So you never know in what situation the cards will be. There'll be some black and some red, and then some more black. Or it might be some red, some black, and some more red. But the important thing is, the chosen card will always be the single color by itself. You can see how there's just one black card amongst all those red ones. There's no red cards amongst the black. There's no red cards amongst those black, and there's only one black card amongst the red. So that's how you can tell what their card is. So now back to the trick. You've had the card chosen, you've had it returned, you've cut the deck a bunch of times. Now comes the questions. And again, the questions are just the presentation. Gives you a reason to look at the deck. So first I like to ask the person, what month were you born in? Say they tell you April. You go, oh, April, interesting. And you turn the cards face up, and you start looking for that one odd color card. There it is, the 10 of clubs. So what you do is grab a bunch of cards, including that one. Doesn't matter how many, just grab a bunch. And tell them, okay, someone who was born in that month would have chosen one of these cards. Now you ask them a second question. And this time I might ask them, are you right-handed or left-handed? If they tell you they're right-handed, you go, oh, very interesting. A right-handed person would have chosen one of these three cards. And what you're doing is you're removing the card that you know is the chosen card, the odd color, and just two other ones. Doesn't matter which two, just two random cards. And you lay them on the table, so the middle one now is the one you know they chose. So that's the second question. You say, oh, from knowing that you're right-handed, I know you would have chose one of these three cards. Now, the last question, I like to make a funny question. Something like, are you wearing socks? Just kind of throws them for a loop, and it makes the trick kind of funny. You could ask them other questions, but I just say, are you wearing socks? And if they say yes, you go, oh, well then you wouldn't have chosen either of these two. A sock-wearing right-handed person born in April always chooses the 10 of clubs, or whatever card they chose. And that is it. That's how you find their card, but you dress it up in the presentation that you're using some sort of psychological knowledge that you have. By asking these three questions, you're able to tell what card they chose. So there you have it. You now can perform the three-question card trick. Oh, and by the way, you don't have to use the same questions that I use. That's what makes doing the magic tricks fun. You can actually change your presentation to fit your personality. For instance, instead of asking them what month they were born, you could ask them, how tall are you? Or what's your favorite color? So you could ask different questions. And the third question, I always like it to be a funny, kind of weird question. You don't have to ask them, are you wearing socks? You could ask them something strange like, how much does your hair weigh? I don't know. Or how long does it take to give a cat a haircut? I don't know, and I don't want to find out. Or how much does a cat's hair weigh? I don't know. But the point is, you can ask them all kinds of different questions that just make it fun and amusing even for yourself. And it doesn't matter if they don't know the answers to the questions. Even if they just say, I don't know, you go, By you not knowing that question, that tells me what card you would have picked. So again, it fits into your presentation. And the other thing I want to tell you is that at the beginning I mentioned you shouldn't show the faces of the cards because people will see they're half red and half black. And the other thing is you really can't shuffle the cards because then they would no longer be half red and half black. Or can you? Oh yes, it's time for an extra for experts. Yeah, there it is. Extra for experts. There's a way you can shuffle the cards that although it will mix them up, it still keeps them in red and black order. Yeah, I'll show you. Now, you might be familiar with a type of shuffle called an overhand shuffle. That's where you just take cards like this and you pull them off the deck into your other hand. And a lot of people shuffle cards this way. It's a common way to shuffle cards. So it's not unusual. It doesn't look strange to see somebody shuffle cards this way. But what's interesting is it keeps the cards in red and black order. They're still half red and half black. Now, why is that? Well, it's because you take care when you're doing the shuffle. And I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to do it with the cards face out so you can see what's happening. Now, when you do this, you don't shuffle them with the face out because your audience would see the half red and half black. But here's what happens. There's 52 cards in a deck. So that means there's 26 red and 26 black. So if you start shuffling off the front, you can do about 10 to 15 cards in bunches, and they're all going to be the same color. Then when you get close to like, 20 cards or so, and you don't have to count, you can just estimate, you start doing them individually. So you see I'm pulling off individual red cards, and you keep doing that, and then you get into the black ones. Now you won't know this because you're looking at the backs, but you just estimate roughly half. And now you know you've done enough where you've probably are into the black cards, you can start taking them in bunches again. And that's it. And the cards stay divided as half red and half black. And from the front, it looks very deceptive. So you just take some bunches, then you take a few individual cards, and you can be talking while you're doing it just to help pass the time and go, yeah, I thought I'd just give them a quick shuffle before I do the trick. And it keeps them in half red, half black order. Wow, I even amaze myself when I do that. So that's a little extra for experts. Again, you don't have to do the shuffle, but after you perform the trick a few times, you might start feeling, you know what, I'm ready to try it with the shuffle. So practice doing that shuffle, and it'll make the trick a little bit more amazing because the audience thinks, well, the cards were mixed up beforehand, everything's fine. So that's it for the 3 questions card trick. I hope you practice, and more importantly, I hope you try it out on somebody. I've been Mike Rose. I'll see you next time. So long. Hello, I'm magician Mike Rose, and I'm here today to teach you a card trick. And today's card trick is called, what's it called? Let me check my notes. Got my notebook here. Oh, today's card trick is called the note. So come on down to the table and let me show you the trick. So here's how you perform the card trick called the note. You have a notebook and you have a deck of cards. Now when you begin, you can hand the deck of cards to a person and ask them to shuffle them as much as they want. And then you ask them to start dealing cards onto the table. Now I'm doing this myself because I don't have a person here to do it for me, but normally you would have your spectator, your volunteer, your audience member deal cards to the table. And while they're dealing them, you say, now I have my notebook here because it's going to prove that I can actually predict the future. And you say, keep dealing cards. So they deal some more cards. And you emphasize that they can really stop whenever they want. They can deal as many or as few as they want. When they've finally stopped, you say, let me show you what I wrote in my notebook. It says the 4 of clubs. That proves I can predict the future. And they're going to say, well, what are you talking about? You go, well, you could have stopped dealing cards wherever you wanted, and you stopped right on the 4 of clubs. And the note has predicted the future. Now here's how it works. Unfortunately, you can't really predict the future with a deck of cards. what you do is you choose a card. In this case, I decided on the 4 of clubs, and you write it down in a notepad. And then you take the card that matches what you wrote, the 4 of clubs, and hold it under the notepad. So I'm just holding it with a couple fingers there underneath. And the rest of the cards you hand to a person who's going to help you with the trick. Of course, they don't know that you've got the 4 of clubs hidden under the notepad. That's a secret. So they take the cards, you can have them shuffle them if they want, and then you ask them to start dealing the cards onto the table. And they just keep dealing cards, and you tell them they can stop dealing whenever they want. They can deal as few or as many as they want, and while you're talking, you can gesture with the notepad. This sort of gives you a little bit of credibility why you're holding the notepad, besides the fact that it's going to predict the future. Because you could just have the notepad sitting down someplace or hand it to somebody, but then the trick wouldn't work. So after they've dealt a few, you say, so is that where you want to stop? And they'll finally say, yeah, that's where I want to stop. Say, well, let me show you what I've got written in the notebook. And you hold the notebook over the pile of cards, and you let that extra card just drop. So I just let it drop, but you're covering it when you're opening the notepad. And then you can bring the notepad up away from the cards and show it over here off to the side. And that sort of distances the notepad from the cards, so people won't quite realize that you could have dropped the card onto the pile. So you open your notepad, say, yeah, I predicted the 4 of clubs. That proves I can predict the future. And they'll look at you like, what are you talking about? Say, well, you could have stopped dealing wherever you wanted, and you stopped right on the 4 of clubs. And that's all there is to it. You just secretly add the card to the pile from the bottom of your notepad. Now, something that's kind of important, you might find that you have a person who's very neat, and they deal the cards into a neat pile. And you can't really drop the 4 of clubs onto a neat pile without it looking sort of strange. So if you have somebody who's dealing the cards in a neat pile, and you're holding your notepad with your 4 of clubs hidden underneath, as they're dealing, say, now remember, you can deal as many cards as you want. You've dealt quite a few already, but you can deal more. And while you're emphasizing that they've dealt a lot, you mess up the pile. So that way later when you add your 4 of clubs secretly to the top, it's not as obvious because the pile's messy. Now you'll find most people kind of deal a messy pile anyway, so you don't have to worry about it. But for the few times where you get somebody who's really neat, that little tip will help you to mess up the pile while you're talking about it. And then again, you just add the 4 of clubs, show your prediction, and turn over the top card that they apparently stopped at, and you've proven that you can predict the future. One of the cool things about this trick, the note, is that it can be altered to fit your personality, your performing style. For instance, you don't have to use a notebook to hide the card. You could use something else, perhaps a regular book. You can hide the card under the book just like you would with a notepad, but it's under a book. And in the book would be a piece of paper which you would just call a bookmark. And of course the bookmark would actually be your prediction that you have at the end after they've finished dealing the cards. Another neat thing to do is not to use just any book, but use a magic book. Now, most of you probably know that when you go to the library, they actually have a whole section of magic books. Books that teach you how to do magic tricks, and not just card tricks, all kinds of magic tricks. So a neat thing to do is to check out a magic book from the library, get yourself a piece of paper and write your prediction on it, and tuck it in the magic book like a bookmark. Then you could perform the trick, the note, and while you're doing it, you talk about your magic book, how you've been learning magic tricks, and you're working on one with cards. And when they've gotten to a certain point, they've turned over the card, you say, yeah, that's interesting, because my bookmark actually predicts that card, as if it's a trick you learned from the book you got from the library. And you could use other things. Use your imagination. You could use maybe a framed photo. It could be a photo of a famous magician, and you could have the note ahead of time just folded up and sitting on the table. So you say, yeah, I have this prediction, or maybe a letter that you got from a famous magician. So you show the photo, the playing card is hidden under the photo, you use it just the way you would with the notepad, and then you unfold the letter that the magician sent you, and it predicts the card that they stopped at. So you really can use your imagination and make this trick into different types of tricks using the exact same secret of just secretly loading a card onto the pile of dealt cards. And they've got a whole new trick. So I hope this will get your creative juices flowing so that you can come up with your own tricks, but make sure you try this one on your friends. It really is an amazing trick. Well, my time's up. I thank you so much for watching, and I do hope you learned some fun things during this series. We've gone through a lot of tricks, so go back and revisit some of them and fool your friends. I've been Mike Rose. See you around. Thanks.